Alright, let's go. So today we're going to be talking about the Raider from Synthetik Legion Rising. Raider is the class that I have the most playtime on in Synthetik, and in my opinion it's the most overpowered class, tied with Assassin, and just better than Engineer and Sniper. So the Raider is really good for a lot of reasons, but the main one is the fact that he has a lot of mobility and he's able to utilize it really well. As opposed to, say, the Assassin, who has a lot of mobility, not quite as much as the Raider, but isn't quite able to utilize it to the same degree that the Raider can. So the Raider's loadout and modules and passives all kind of come together to make it so that he's one of the he is the only class in the game that doesn't need to stop ever. You can be continuously moving on the Raider. You don't need to pause to fucking let heat run out. You don't have to pause to reset your accuracy. I mean, obviously you can do that in some circumstances. It's good to do so, but the Raider never needs to do so. Not like the heavy gunner, the sniper, to a lesser extent the breacher, riot guard. The Raider just has none of that. He's just always moving. He's always on the fucking ADHD meds, and they're never fucking working. So we're gonna go over his loadout very quickly. Firstly, Kaida Model H is the handgun that you want to be using every game. Every time. Some people are gonna prefer the Desert Eagle because haha, big damage, or the Auto 945, which I can kind of understand. I can kind of see why you go for the Auto 945. If you're bad at aiming, like, that's perfectly fine. But for the most part, we're going to want to go with the Kaida Model H. It's fast, it's accurate, it doesn't have a lot of movement speed decrease. It's just the whole package as a gun. It's everything we want on the Raider. And while we're going to be talking about the Kaida Model H in more detail later on, for now I want to go over the modules. What modules are, they're passives that you can give yourself as part of your loadout. And for the Raider, we're going to go Charge every goddamn game. What Charge does is it gives you 15% crit for 2 seconds and damage immunity while dashing. What this means is that it's going to make you basically playing Dark Souls with your iframes on your dash, as well as meaning that your vibroblade, when you're dashing with it and doing damage, it's going to be doing more damage, it's going to have higher crit chance. But obviously the important thing, the reason we take it every single game, is for the iframes. They're just absolutely essential. Now, along with this, I'm also going to recommend that you take Routine. And what Routine does is it makes it so every active reload success, you're going to gain 1 stack of armor pen and 1 stack of 1% movement speed. And that stacks up to 15 times. So if you could get 15 active reloads, which is pretty easy on the Raider because of the Kaida Model H's quick reload, as well as the fact that you're usually going to be using shotguns, SMGs, other guns that have quick reloads, you're going to be able to get a lot of stacks for Routine very quickly, which means you're going to get 15% movement speed and 15 armor penetration essentially for free. It's absolutely awesome. If you like playing with LMGs, if you fucking suck at doing the active reloads, I recommend picking up Drone Mod. What Drone Mod does is it allows your companion drone, that little fucker flying around you, it allows that to fire. And it's got a fire rate of 80 shots per minute, so just under 1.5 per second, right? It's not a lot of damage, but it is a little bit of supplementary damage, and it kind of makes up for Routine. Not really, if you're someone who isn't good at hitting those active reloads. Now, besides those two, some people like taking things like Madness, On the Edge, Press the Attack, and obviously, be sure to experiment with that, see what you like, see what synergizes with your playstyle, because we all have different preferences. We're all going to play the game a little bit differently. Now, if modules out of the way, we're now going to talk about the items that you can choose, and these are active items that you can select as part of your loadout. Firstly, we're going to take the Ceph-Up Suitcase Sentry all the time. The amount of outplay potential, the amount of setups you can do with the Ceph-Up Suitcase Sentry are just crazy. It's an insane item, and I recommend you take it all the time. Along with the Suitcase Sentry, we're also going to take Overdose. Now, Overdose is really good. It's just a very brainlet, very simple, it just heals you. It reduces your shields when you activate it, which means that you can't use it in the middle of combat a lot of the time, but it's just a delayed heal. It means that you're never going to go into a boss fight without your full HP. It means that if you want to, you can camp, add a teleporter, and then just use it a couple of times, and then go into the next room at full HP. It's just a very consistent choice for your active item. Now, the Raider's core weapon, the Vibroblade, obviously it has a lot to it. The first and most important thing to know is that after level 10, the cooldown will actually reset upon getting a kill with the Vibroblade, which means that you can do a lot of leapfrogging. It allows you to stay in fights that you otherwise wouldn't be able to stay in. But it also something that you need to be very careful with due to the second most important thing about the Raider's Vibroblade. That is, the damage actually charges up over time of not using it. So let's say you hit someone, that extra damage, immediately goes away. So instead of doing 1k damage, you're going to suddenly be doing 600 damage. So if you dash into a group of enemies, right, you one-shot one of them with a blade, and then you think, okay, well, clearly I can one-shot these guys, and you go and you use it on another guy, and you only do half his HP, and then die, you're dead. Like, there's nothing you can really do to outplay that. So you got to be very careful with that. Make sure that you're always doing, you're always using your Vibro Blade on the lowest HP enemy possible to guarantee yourself that cooldown reset along with lifesteal. Because the blade actually gives you HP on kills. Now, this HP isn't like based on damage done, it's actually kind of randomized. It does seem to increase if you get multiple kills with one swing, but I haven't been able to confirm that, and fucking no one online is doing data testing for Synthetik, honestly. So next important thing to know about the Vibroblade is that dashing will actually increase the damage. So if you're up against, say, a Headhunter, a Devastator, a Redguard, someone you need to kill very quickly, dash blade is going to be your best option. The next thing to know is that the Vibroblade actually resets a bit of weapon heat as well. So if you're using SMG, for example, you half empty your clip, your heat is high, you dash in, you Vibroblade, your heat is now only kind of moderately high, you can get off a few more shots. That might be the difference between life and death in that situation. The Seft Heart. The main reason we get the Seft Heart is for setups like this. You could place it down, have enemies attacking it, and then obviously you could flank around and hit them. That's not too difficult. Now, you can also use the Seft Heart to tank pretty much any projectile that isn't AoE. Things like railguns, grenades, bullbots, you're not going to be able to block with the Seft Heart. When it comes to a lot of other stuff, particularly shotgun blast, you're going to be able to block with it, and it just opens up a lot of variety when it comes to responding to threats. Once you get level 20 with the Raider class, at 30 dog tags you're going to get the aircom, which is this. That's right, you get to cosplay Americans during Vietnam. Alright, anyone who plays Halo will be able to tell you this next one. You should always switch to your secondary rather than trying to reload your primary in the middle of a fight. Whether you're doing a double shotgun build, whether you're doing an SMG spec build, whether you just got the Kata Model H and then like one other weapon, always switch to your secondary instead of trying to reload. It's faster. Your secondary might be the Kata Model H, in which case you're going to have good damage output anyway. And now let's talk about weapons. So obviously we don't get to choose which weapon pickups we get. That's randomized. So I don't think it's very useful to sit here and say, for example, oh, the Battle Hymn or the P9000 is really good on the Raider. It is, obviously, but we don't get to, we can't consistently get those weapons. So I think it's better to talk about what we're looking for in weapons so you can keep an eye out. So for the Raider, the main thing we're looking for is movement speed, accuracy. So we want as little deviation during movement speed, especially moving backwards, moving forward, as possible. So for the Raider, we're going to be looking for SMGs and shotguns primarily. Now, in my opinion, there are two primary builds that work well with the Raider. The first one is having an SMG, then having a utility weapon, then having the Kata Model H, which is just a great plugging tool. It's medium to long range, it's got a good accuracy, good damage all throughout the game, even late game. It's just great for picking up where other weapons might leave slack. So, for example, let's go with an SMG build. You might get something like the K7 Competition, which is probably the best SMG in the game for the Raider. And then as your secondary, you want to have a utility weapon. Say a medic weapon, for example, which is going to give you that passive regen when you have it on your back. That's really good. But then your secondary might also be utilitarian in a different way. For example, it could be the Yoko Lagun, which does a crap ton of damage to bosses. Or it could be the M32 multi-purpose, which is absolutely ideal for getting a group of enemies low so that you can finish them off with your Vibroblade. It could also, of course, be something like the Flak Cannon, which again serves the same purpose. It's just good for getting enemies low for your Vibroblade to finish them off. Now, the second build for the Raider, and one that I'd argue is more Chad, but harder to play with, is having two shotguns. Now, if you're going to go with a shotgun on the Raider as your primary, you need to have either a second one or another primary as your secondary. Like, basically, a shotgun is not a good primary for the Raider unless you have two of them. Now, my personal recommendation is the KSG 2000 and the Super 90. If you can get that combination, that is so nice to play. But obviously, like I said, we can't always guarantee that. You're not going to be able to consistently do that in a run. But having two shotguns is probably the ideal way to play the Raider. Dash into a group of enemies, bam bam, you've half health most of them, you sword, you're out of ammo with your shotgun because they only usually have 2 to 6 bullets. Then you switch out to your other one, bam bam again, and you've cleared nearly anything. The only thing that's going to be able to survive that will be bosses and some like hover tanks. Maybe the tracked flame units might survive early, but any infantry, obviously, your standard troopers, your assassins, your hyper troopers, your late game red guard, any of that is going to just be obliterated by that kind of barrage from shotguns. Now, obviously, a problem with having double shotguns is also the fact that you're not going to have a lot of long range firepower, but that's okay. You've got the Model H, which gives you a nice, consistent, accurate source of firepower at long range. With that said, that's about all I've got to say about weapons, so we're going to move on to items now. Again, it's something that I don't want to spend too much time on. It's something that we can't control. I don't like talking about that inconsistent stuff. So I'm just going to mention a few items that are particularly good, particularly noteworthy for the Raider, and then I'll put a chart on the screen from fucking Reddit or Google Images or some shit. Fangs of Mortagon is an obvious choice. It's a lifesteal item that is also going to increase your maximum health and causes bleeding. It's got a 14-second cooldown to begin with, but that goes down as you upgrade it. In my opinion, it's the best item. Like, if you see that in a shop, you should absolutely be looking to buy it. The Black Berserk charm is also really good on the Raider. Firstly, it removes your shields, and that grants you increased fire rate, health regen, and damage absorption, so armor essentially. The effect gets stronger at lower health, which is obviously synergizes with the fact that it's going to get rid of your shields. The one thing is that it does mean that you're going to be playing on the edge. Like, if you take damage, you're done for. You don't have your shields to defend you. Then two more noteworthy items there are the Ripjack Hyperblade, which it gives you AoE damage that you otherwise wouldn't have. I'll have the effects up on the screen now. And of course the Living Bomb. Because the Raider spends a lot of time in the thick of it, the Living Bomb is really good. It means that you can get out some damage. It's particularly useful against bosses like the Raptor, where you want to be up in their face. It gives you an extra chance to stay alive. It's especially useful when we consider the fact that we're also going to be taking the Overdose, because you can Living Bomb and then immediately Overdose, and you'll actually get the healing from Overdose before your immunity from the Living Bomb wears out. Alright, we're gonna go for a lightning round of Raider specific boss stuff. Against the giant enemy spider, you have a massive advantage. Just dash out of its mortar shots and you're all good. You can use the Ceph turret to tank the lasers and the missiles as well. For the Raptor type E, the jet enemy, what you gotta do is fucking dodge the Toho. You have 2 dashes and you've got iframes. You can iframe through the Toho blasts. You just gotta time your dashes properly. Against the unstable mass, again, the Raider has a massive advantage over other characters. What you gotta do is use your Vibroblade if you're getting overwhelmed, which shouldn't happen anyway, as you have charge. You got 2 dashes, you got more mobility than everyone else. Alright, Arena Masters is another fairly simple one. You just gotta make sure you take out the sniper first, that way the shield dude and the flamethrower dude, they can't really reach you, they don't have enough range to match your mobility. Then we've got the tanks. Take out the one on the right. If you take out the one on the right, you win the fight. If you take out the one on the left, you die. And then finally the last defender. Just at the beginning of the fight, drop your Ceph turrets and immediately right click the boss. Like, if you need to make sure you do this straight away, that way you get the cooldown going, you get that extra damage from being able to pull it off another couple of times. And beyond that though, you gotta make sure that you're dodging before you're attacking. Using your reload intervals isn't enough here, you've gotta make sure that you're also dodging while you're firing. Alright, now the last thing that needs to be discussed is co-op. For most characters, this isn't necessarily an important thing to talk about. For the most part, you're going to be playing the same in co-op as you would in solo. But the Raider is an exception. Due to the increased enemy saturation in co-op, the Raider has to be more careful when he goes in. As well as this, you also need to be able to dodge your allies' attacks. Now, this might sound straightforward, but it means that you need to be aware of both where your ally is, where your enemy is, who your ally is going to be firing at, where you are, where you're going to be dashing to, and ricochet. You've got to calculate all of that. If your ally has the Nemesis, you can fucking uninstall the game. Tell them to uninstall the game too. And if your ally picks up this item, tell them to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because they're an absolute bastard. Alright, that's just about everything I've got to say about the Raider. Hope this video comes in handy at all. Peace.